Hello. Today I'm going to talk about a wire wrapping technique that I like to call the zipper. Looks like that. I think it probably has another name, but that's what I call it. And this weave is probably one of the most basic weaves that's really super versatile and also just looks really awesome. It's got this nice kind of figure eight shape. That ends up looking really detailed, like a little lattice, and you can use it to make an entire wire weave. I use it to make these pretty simple but cool looking wire wraps. So I wrap this around the edges, and then I use it again for the bail, and then I use the same wrap but with a little bit of variation for the decorations around the top. So it's a really good one if you've been making single strand wraps for a while and you want to kind of diversify what you're doing and start to get into wire weaving. This would be one of the best first styles to do. I've been kind of practicing my wire weaving like this for about a year, and this is kind of where I'm at. This is one of the more simple ones that I have made, but it's the most recent one that I've made, so I thought it'd be a really good one to use as an example for this video. So the way you're going to get started on this is you're going to need two different thicknesses of wire. I use 20 gauge and 26 gauge, I believe. Um, and those two are, I like those two the best because 20 seems to be a really good thickness um, that is really stable but still really flexible. I use dead soft copper wire most often. There's dead hard, which is it dead hard? I can't remember. That's quite, but it's the harder wire, and that stuff's not going to be so malleable, but it's going to be really stable. But I like using the soft stuff because I can really get these really kind of beautiful swirls and really manipulate the wire, but then it's still very stable. And then I use the thinner wire. I use the 26 gauge. It might be 22 and 26. I'll have to look it up, and I'll put in the bio what's actually. I'll link to where I get my wire and what thicknesses that I use because I found a really good shop that just has really high quality copper that I really like. I really like it because it's not coated and it's really high quality for a good price. So I'll show you where I get those. Um, so yeah, you're going to have these two thicknesses of wire, and then you're going to want to choose a stone. And you can choose, there's two different types of stones I like using for jewelry. One is going to be kind of randomly shaped polishes. And if you go to your local metaphysical shop or crystal shop, they'll usually have bowls of polished rocks. And you can find some that are shaped really nicely. Like I just found this one. It's shaped really like square like, so it's got this nice flat face. You can look for some that it have nice shapes for making jewelry, but still this was probably just like sliced in big chunks and then kind of randomly broken and put in a polisher. And this is a diopside stone. It's super green and got some really great healing properties. The other type of stone you can use, which I'm going to use right now for my example, are cabochons, and these ones are going to be cut with a flat backside like this, and then kind of a rounded, polished front. And those you can, I know of several crystal shops that cut their own cabochons. You can also buy them on Etsy and find them online in a bunch of different places on Instagram and stuff like that. So I'm going to use a cabochon. I really like using these because they end up looking super clean and classy when I'm done because they're cut specifically for making jewelry. They really easily show off the stone. These ones, excuse me, these ones can be really nice as well. They're going to be a lot heavier, which is kind of nice sometimes, but you know, just choose whichever one you feel drawn to. I have a couple more. This one in here is just a random tumble, but it ended up almost being like a cabochon. See, it's not cut so specifically like something like this really has like a cut side. You can see that it's like sliced, and then it's got this nice sparkly plum color. So I'm going to use this rhodochrosite to start out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thicker wire, which has kind of disappeared, but that's okay because I already cut pieces off, so I don't need the roll anymore. I'm going to cut off a piece. What I do is I pull it out and I measure it kind of around the stone. So I'm going to just kind of be like, okay, I want it to go around this stone, and I kind of just visualize, and then I want maybe 1 to 2 inches left over above the top. So it's really not that exact. Don't worry about it too much. Go a little bit too longer if you're kind of worried about it. Going a little bit too long is better for this stage here. So you have something like this, and then you're going to want to cut a second piece that's the same length. So again, yeah, I don't think these are exact, but it doesn't matter that much. You know, you're going to cut off the ends. That's why I recommend definitely starting with copper, or even, you know, some. I don't really like the coated wires. You can, if you go to most craft stores, they'll have like coated wires of all these different colors, and those scrape off really easily, and then they're not going to look good for very long. Copper is going to be your most inexpensive raw metal that's not coated, and so over time it's just going to get a nice kind of tarnish on it that gives it this really kind of antique-y look, but it's not going to rub off. It's in its raw form, so it's going to stay really nice forever. Sterling silver as well will do that, as well as stainless steel. Stainless steel I found is really hard to work with though, because it's just so hard. It ends up hurting my hands and I can't get a tight wrap on it. So sterling silver is my favorite to work with, or copper and sterling silver are both my favorites, but sterling silver is a little more expensive. Actually, a lot more expensive, but it's really nice. So take these two pieces. I've got these about the same length. So then I'm going to take my thinner wire, my 20 gauge, 22, 26, whatever, I mix the numbers up, thinner wire. And this one, again, you just kind of measure out an approximate length, kind of longish. I kind of measured this one. I kind of just do it by gut feel of like how long I think the wire should be. At first, you want to kind of go a little bit too short. If don't go too long. This one's about maybe 3 feet, because you're going to want it to. If your stone's really small that you're using, you want a shorter amount of wire, because you're gonna wrap until you run out of wire, and then you'll get these kind of these ends here, and these ends are gonna help hold the stone into the wire wrap. So it's better to aim a little bit too short on this stage. So a little bit too short is okay. Don't worry about it too much. So you're going to take one of your thicker pieces of wire, and I just kind of straighten it out so it doesn't have any kinks in it. You can kind of just pull along it so it's really nice and straight. And then you take your longer piece of wire and kind of roughly fold it in half and find the approximate middle. Again, it doesn't matter too much. And then you want to kind of take the middle of your strand here, and you're going to just take this long wire and wrap it around the thick wire 2 times. And you can kind of futz with it with your nails to make those 2 little wraps really stick close together. And so you'll have something like that. Okay, sweet. So then you're going to want to take that and hold it in your hand so that your thumb can kind of squish down across where you put those 2 wraps. Then you're going to take the second one and put it next to it. And you kind of want to make this shape so that the edges are pointing away from each other. That's going to make it so the wire is really inclined to stay open like this. If you put them like this, they're going to want to cross over each other, and they're going to want to squeeze close to each other. So if you put them, oops, spin this top one again. If you put them like that, so the edges, they're going to have a natural curve, and that's going to keep your wrap open. So you ran out of space, so I had to stop. So yeah, I was saying these, if you hold it like this, it's going to keep your wrap open, so that you can more easily manipulate the size of this and not have wiggles in your wrap. So okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these, and just below where I wrapped, I'm going to hold them in my thumb so that my thumb's like this, really holding these down flat, like a clamp. And I'm going to take this string. This strand is the one that's crossing over the one that hasn't been wrapped yet. And you're going to look, and you're going to see that it's coming from underneath. See that? It's coming from underneath. Both of these actually are. Now if I wrap this one over, now this one's coming from above, over the top. So I'm going to keep this one out of the way. I'm going to use that one later. But I'm going to keep the one that is going to more naturally Actually, let's see. I want to take the one that's farther away from my thumb. So if my thumb is, I've got 2 strings, one's going to be a little bit closer to my thumb by just those 2 wraps. I'm going to take the other one, and now it looks like this one's coming from above. Don't worry if yours is coming from below. If the one that farther away from your thumb is coming from below, that just means you've got it totally flipped around, and that's totally okay, because it doesn't matter which side you start with. So you want to make sure these 2 wires are lined up with each other. Take the one that's slightly farther away from your thumb, and you're going to take it to the opposite side. So if it came from above on the one that it's wrapped around, you're going to take it below the next one. And then what you're going to do, this first wrap is usually the trickiest one, because what you're doing here is you're determining the size of your band. So you want to have the length that be whatever size you want it to be. So we'll do that. I have an easier way to start it that I'll probably do in a tiny video. But it doesn't look as good at the end. So that's why I'm just starting with this one, because it's a little harder, but it's going to make your wrap look better, hopefully, unless it's really messy. So then what I did is I took it underneath. Yeah, you can't see shit. And then I wrapped it. Let's see this way. So here was my original wrap right here. And then I took that and I brought it underneath the one across from it, and I wrapped it around there. So I'm going to wrap it around. It's going to wrap around 3 times. So it should look like 1, 2, 3 little wraps there. And then I take it under the next one. And then I have 1, 2, or under the previous one, the original one I had wrapped around. And then again, under the second one, and wrap 3 times. And then again, so I'll show you on this from this angle. So I've got it here. It's coming out the side, wrapping it over and under. And then I'm pulling it down to kind of squish it real close. And then every time I wrap, I'm kind of pushing down with this finger to wrap that wrap really close. And then you can take your fingernail and kind of push them into each other so it's super duper tight. So you wrap. And then this one is just, as you're going, you can kind of bend these open because they're gonna want to become closer to each other. Another good way is when you do it to pull away from the center when you're pulling it tight. So I wrap around and then I pull away from the center, and then what that's doing is that's pulling it as open as it can to hopefully keep the band nice and even, because you can start to pull it too tight. Also, if it starts kind of getting uneven and you've got kind of a thing going on where some parts are bigger than the other, don't worry about it too much. Just keep wrapping and do your very best, especially on your first few, because once you put it on your rock, especially if you're using kind of a randomly shaped rock, it's going to look awesome anyways. Because the natural shape of the rock, you can kind of just move your band around to kind of make it fit on the rock, and it's going to look really cool even if it's kind of shaped not super straight. But with the cabochons, it's harder. You want it to be really straight because the stones cut super straight. So yeah, I've done a couple now, and I've got this. So see, mine even already has like kind of a dip in it, which is fine. Another way you can start it is by holding, no, I'll do another video on that. I don't want to add more time onto this one. So if you want to find that how an easier way to start it, go ahead and check for another short video. I'll post that. So I've got this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both sides and I'm just going to wrap until I almost run out of wire. So wrap, wrap, wrap. I do it on both sides, and I would keep going until I completely ran out of wire. I don't look like that. Okay, so when you're almost out of wire, when you get to that very last wrap, you've got about maybe 2-3 inches left. You want to only wrap it around once. Okay, so if you look at it, you don't want to wrap it around 3 times. You just wrap it once, and on one side it should look like one wrap, and on the other side it'll look like two. And that's good. That's how it's supposed to be. Okay? And now I have these both going on one side. I like to do that because I like having, see these thin strands? Those are those ones that are left over. I like having them on the back because then I can create a little nest for the stone, and then the front doesn't have any crossovers, which I think looks really clean. You can also put one of these on one side and have one of these going out the other side. Then you'll have one that wraps across the front, and that can be really nice when you're beginning to hold it in before you have to do all of this stuff. And then it's really, really secure, and then you do all the stuff at the top, and then you're happy, and you can do whatever you want with that. But it's not, none of it's structurally important to keeping the stone in. In this, what's keeping the stone in is this front part, which I think is really great because it looks really nice and clean, as opposed to these. Having these come across the front can look really cool too, and you can have these kind of, I like to put little wiggles in them like that, and then I think they kind of look like waves. You can have those coming across the front, and that can look really, really awesome, but I just think it doesn't look quite as clean as these ones, so that's why I don't do it. But if you want to add yourself a little more structural stability, have one of these ends going off the opposite side. So you'll have one on the front and one on the back when you're done. But I'm going to do this one so I have both of them on the back. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 more pieces of wire. I'm probably just going to start with one. And these ones, you do want them to kind of err on the side of longness. Now, since these are going to be only each on one side, I would say this can be about as long as the first piece of wire. But you're going to now need 2 of them. So whatever, 3 feet about. Again, it really doesn't matter because you can, you're always just going to add it on more wire right at the end. So you usually add wire about 3 times. First time, second time, third time. So I'm going to take this piece of wire. It's approximately longish. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take it, I'm going to go to one of these long ends. I'm going to measure, I'm going to kind of match it on that side. And then I'm going to look for the side that just has one wrap that looks like just one. I'm going to put it right back in there so that it is right next to that. It doesn't really matter what it's doing for the other one. And then you're going to wrap it around right up next to that first one. Now you're doing the same thing, which one side should look like 1 and the other side should look like 2. But now the side that has 2, because it's crossing over itself, is next to the side that had 1. So I'll show you what it looks like a little closer up. So I had this one. My last one on the previous one has just 1 wrap. And now this one is where it crossed over itself. And I'm going to push that one right up next to there. So now I have 3 again. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to look again for my pattern and see, okay, the last one crossed over. You see that one? This last one is crossing over the wire. So I want this one to come under it so that I'm continuing the same pattern that I was doing before. And now then I'm just going to kind of want to wrap out just a little bit. I'm going to do the pattern a few more times to really solidify that wire in there. Maybe, you know, wrap, I don't know, 6 or 7 more times on this one. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to do this, get the wires solidified, and then I'll show you the next step in a minute. Alright, so now I have both of these wires kind of grounded into the project. Something like this. Got these 2 pairs. If you chose to have a little more stability over clarity, it's still gonna look cool. Then you might have 2 of these coming out the other side, which is good. So I've got this wrap going, and I've got both of these now longer wires connected to it. So after I've done kind of just, see, I just did a little bit more on each side, and I did kind of measure it as I went a little bit, just by eyeballing it. this project is now I'm using this different stone, this opalized agate. And what I'm going to do is now before I'm really done with it, I'm going to center this in the bottom of the wrap and then just kind of shape this wire around the edges of it. I kind of did it backwards because I wanted this to be the front. Let's see. Yeah. Let's try that again. All the while, you can be kind of flattening it as you're going. I like using these pliers. They don't have any ridging on the inside, which is nice. And they've got these kind of big flat things. They're really good for kind of flattening things out. And then also this way. If you see how mine's really pretty nice and straight. Sometimes you can get some wiggles in there. And you can always fix that. That's the nice thing about wire is as long as you don't overwork it too much, you can always fix something you do wrong. So it's a very forgiving art form. Let's see. So I'm going to put the front with these wires coming back, shape this around the outside of the stone. Same thing on this side. And then I can really see exactly how much I need to go. The second trickiest part is now getting exactly the right length of this to really fit the stone well. As you can see on this one, I almost did it and almost did not. And so I've got this space kind of at the top, which kind of bugs me. It still ended up looking really nice because the swirl went over the top. So I'm not too worried, and it's held in there really stably, so it ended up working out okay. As I was saying, it ended up working out okay, but the perfectionist in me wants it to be exact. So here I am measuring this at the top. And now I'm going to keep wrapping. Looks like, you can see there I am. I'm just at the top on each of these, so I probably need maybe like 4 more wraps on each side. So we'll do that and get back to you. So I did 4 more on each side. And now let's see, I'm going to see, they're not quite the same length. When I'm here at the top, when I want to finish at the top, I'm going to want to have one long wire coming out of each side. So if you can see now that they're at the top, if I look at it this way, I've got this side that's one, and those are going to end up going together, and this side that's another side. So they're going to change pairs of wires, essentially. So I want one wire coming out the back of the project, and one wire coming out the front. See how that's working there? And that's going to just depend on which side I finished on at the top. So I can manipulate that, and I want one to be coming out each side. So now I've got it a little bit longer. I'm going to measure it once again by putting the stone into this kind of like that and just holding it on there, kind of shaping it around the stone, and then pushing it over the top here. And now at this point, it looks like to get it really centered, I just need one more on one side and maybe like, and by one I mean like, so this top part it's kind of tricky. If you bend it over, you're going to have to bend it back up, but you can keep it in this kind of the U format. And by one more, I mean like this wire crossing and then wrapping 3 times again. And it kind of honestly feels like just wrapping twice because one wrap is going to be like the long piece. Okay, coming over. Alright, so there's 1 on that side, and then I'm going to add 3 on this side. I'm still making sure that when I end up, 1 is on each side, front and back of the wrap, so that I can use those to connect the top. So there's 1. Again, always pushing down a little bit with your nail to keep them nice and tight. 2. And I'm always kind of manipulating the frame wires a little bit, just being aware of the shape of them and where they're going. They're kind of open in these Y shapes, which again is really helpful in keeping it open, because otherwise they're going to want to get close to each other. So I think that's 3, and now that puts me with 1 wire going on each side. And so I'm going to check it again. I think this should be good. Except see, one of them is taller than the other, so maybe I'll do 2 more on this side so that they're the same height. Then they're really going to match and make it centered. So there we go, I just did 1 and 2 more, and that'll again put me with the wires going opposite each other. So you can see the top, this one, you can just kind of wrap and wrap and wrap when you're at the first wire. Here you have to kind of continually check it and manipulate the shape so that you are making sure that it's going to really fit your stone. Because each stone is really different shape, and so there's not really a exact, like, oh, do it this many times. You just want to get it so it's really fitting whatever stone you're using. Alright, sweet. So that's looking good now. So I've kind of, oopsies, bye. So I can kind of show you what it looks like at the top. When it's really close, if you're going to get it to cross, here we go. And yeah, you can see they're really, really close to lining up. So that's going to be probably good enough, and I can, it gives a little bit, and you can kind of pull it a little bit closer and pull it a little bit farther depending on once you've actually tightened it. So I like to hold the stone in here for this part, but if it falls out, it's not a big deal. Just try not to crush the frame. So you're going to take whichever one you want to first, the long strand, and wrap it around. There's not really a super awesome way to do this, like particular way to do this, but you take this long one, and you're going to wrap it around the one that's crossing over it. So at the top, it should look like this. And now you can see I've got these 2 pairs of wires. They're switching pairs, okay? So now I'm going to have a back 2 and a front 2, okay? So I'm taking the long wire, and I'm wrapping it around the front 2. So I'm taking it from the one that it's on, taking it behind it. And you can kind of wrap however you feel is going to actually keep it solid. So don't wrap it too many times, though, especially the front one, because you want it to look really clean. You'd be surprised, you really only need like 1 wrap of this, I think 26 gauge wire to really keep it solid. So if you just wrap it like once, you can just kind of leave it at that. Okay, so now it's just wrapped around 1 time there at the top. Now I'm going to take the other side. Same thing. This one's kind of coming from a different angle, so I'm going to take it in front first and wrap it around just 1 time. So now at this point, usually the stone falls out, and that's fine. And so I've got this frame, and I usually go with the back first, because that one is less artistic, so you can kind of just make that one first so that you've got it really stably as a frame. So what you're going to do is really similar to what you did here. Take this wire that you've wrapped it around, both wires, just once, maybe twice. Okay, I thought I was going to sneeze. Alright, so we take this long wire, and now we wrap it around once, around just one of the wires. Doesn't really matter which one. Sorry, not just once, but 2 times. And then at this point, I kind of bend them up, so they're more of a dramatic looking V. So what we're making now is this veil part. So I'm starting on that to really solidify the frame. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to wrap it. Then I'm going to start that same pattern. I wrap it twice, just because it's so small at the bottom. I wrap it just twice for the first couple wraps, maybe just 1 of them, maybe 2 of them, kind of depending on how tight your V is. Haha. And then after just like 2 wraps of maybe only 2 around, then go back to 3 around and start going on that same way. So it's going to open out in a V. You don't want it to get too big, Actually, I'm just going to stop there with that. And just after you've started that top, that should really solidify the top of the frame, and then you can leave that at that for just for a minute, and we'll come back to it in the next video. So then what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave the front with just these two wrapped around once. It's pretty stable, and so it should be fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these back ones that I've got sticking out the back, and I'm going to make it into a nest for my stone, so I can really start to solidify it in there. So I'm going to put the stone in. I'm really starting to shape it around it. And now I've got these back things. Now if your stone is like this, it's going to matter a lot more where these go, and you're really going to want to get that in there. But since this one's really a cabochon and it's lining up exactly with this, I could even do this without the stone in there, because I don't need it to be any specific like length coming out the back. Unlike this one, it needed to be a very specific shape to fit the stone in there well. But with this one, I'm going to shape it around the stone, and then I'm going to take the stone out so you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these strands coming out the back. I'm just going to bring them across. And here you can be a little bit artistic with it. You can decide where exactly they want to go. So I can have different patterns, like, oh, maybe I want these two to come down here, and then I want these two to come up here, and then that's going to look pretty, you know, even and classy and kind of nice. And so you really just, you take it and you find kind of a looser spot in the wrap around the outside where there's like a little bit of space. Let's see where those are. And then I'm going to take this, looks like it's a needle, and I'm going to thread it through the inside of the wrap, like that. Right up at a spot where there's a little more space. Then I'm going to pull it through, just like a needle and thread. And I pull it as tight as I can without disrupting the shape of the frame. And it's okay if it's a little tiny bit loose, because there's a cool way you can really fix that. So then you have that there. So then I'm just going to shape it out again, make sure it doesn't get too pulled. You might even at this point want to check it with the stone again to make sure you're not making it too tight for your stone. So I'm just going to pop my stone back in there, reshape it real quick before I put the next one on. And then I'm going to put the next one on, same deal. And if there's not a loose spot where you want it to go, you can kind of with your fingernail kind of open up a spot. Or sometimes you can even just put it where there isn't a spot and just wrap it around the outside. But if there is a little bit of a spot, it's gonna stay better because it'll slide in between the previous wraps and just really lay in there really tightly, which is nice. So now I've got this. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the top. Finding a spot where there's a little bit of space, putting it, sliding it in like a needle and thread, and wrapping it around. Alright, and then the very last one. And I kind of look at them and try to make them kind of even and look aesthetically pleasing. Because even though it is the back, you still want it to look nice. And they can look pretty cool if they're just kind of randomly placed too. You just, whatever your aesthetic is, random or balanced, or one of them going one way. You know, this one I've got it kind of, you know, I've got one coming down the side and then those two kind of going the same direction. So, you know, whatever you feel is cool. And now at this point, I've got this, and I've got these ones coming off the side. If I wanted to, I could bring that over again and do some sort of weavy, crossy thing, but I don't think I'm going to actually do that on this one because I think it's going to be too busy. And then you want to, the nice thing about doing this without the stone in is you can pull it back through a second time, and then it's going to be coming from inside the center, inside your wrap. And then you can, what I like to do is I like to literally just pull tightly on it and wiggle it back and forth. You can cut it, but I find that gets it a really close cut, and then the end of the wire is hidden inside the wrap. So then I'm going to do that again With this one, I'm going to pull it through a second time so that it's coming from inside the wrap. Pull it really tightly, wiggle it back and forth, and it'll break off right at the edge. And these ones are a little bit tighter, but I think I'm still going to do it. There's still going to be space for the second wraparound. And that'll make it, it's just going to be super, super stable at that point because it's wrapped around twice. And then when you kind of pull on the end, it gets super, super tight, and it's going to break it off right at the edge. And then we go push it through again. And then we go. There we go. Sweet. So now I've got this nice little frame in the back. This little open spot in the front. And this is the most satisfying thing ever, when it just pops right in there and it stays. There we go. I'm just going to shape it again just a little bit around the outside. There we go. That's what I've got. So keep a lookout for the next video where I'm going to talk about doing the bail, finishing the bail, and finishing the front. So thank you so much for watching.